Hi guys, welcome back to part 2 of our Maze Mayhem Scratch tutorial. We had a lot of fun last week and we're getting to some fairly complex coding, but I think you guys are going to enjoy the result of this. So I was telling you guys a little bit last week about the genesis of this game. This started when I found a website called Mazegenerator Net. Let me show you right now again. So this website just creates mazes. You can set up the parameters here, the width and height of the maze. For Scratch purposes, you can basically use what's already in here. So we're just going to click on the Generate button and not change any of the parameters around. And you can see it generates a lovely little maze with the exit at the top and the bottom. We're going to spin this sideways to be able to use it in our game in Scratch, but basically we don't have to make any other changes to this to get this to work. You can see that every time I click Generate New, it creates a brand new maze with different insides. And so I created 10 of these, saved them as JPEG or PNGs and went download, saved them and then re-imported them into Scratch, and then from there we can do all kinds of fun stuff with it. So the object of the game, let me show you again what we've been working on up until this point. The object of the game is to get through the maze before your opponent does. You're moving in opposite directions, which means at some point you're going to want to move past each other, but as soon as you touch each other, you nuke each other and send each other back to the beginning of the game. So the only way you're going to get past each other is by cheating using one of the very many different kinds of power-ups we have available. We've got 8 different power-ups we're going to implement in this game, and they all do something a little different. And so we've got the game pretty much set up. Let me show you what we got up till this point here. So we're moving around through our maze quite nicely. You can see we're bouncing off the walls. I can't go through our walls. Our right player moves with the arrow keys. Our left player moves with WASD. And you'll both be able to play this game simultaneously. So let's go up to the top here. Here's our first turtle power-up. You can see that we've got it set up so that when I run over it, it disappears and generates a new power-up somewhere else on the screen, so that there's always 8 power-ups on the screen. So we've already coded all of that. We're looking really good. Now we just need to make the power-ups do something every time we hit it. But that's where things get a little bit more complicated. So we're going to get into some fairly elaborate code today, but bear with me and I think it'll all make sense. So let's go back to our code here. You can see everything that we did. We're inside our power-up now, our power-up sprite, and most of the code we're doing today is going to be inside there. We got some stuff to do. So just before we finished the other day, we got created this custom block called Catch Power-Up, and everything that we do that's related to power-ups is going to get attached to this block. Now, we haven't used complex blocks like this, custom blocks like this that have parameters in them. By parameter, I just mean the custom block has some extra features where there's some extra information that it needs in order to run properly. Up until now, we've been using custom blocks just to have something happen in a separate part of the code, to be able to take a whole bunch of functions and put them into a separate part of the code that we can call on when we need it to. But sometimes that extra code needs some information. And in this case, whenever we touch a power-up, we need 2 pieces of information. Which player touched the power-up, because we're inside our power-up sprite, so we don't automatically know it's this player or that player that touched it. So we have to get it to detect which player touched it. And we also need to know what costume is it wearing when it touched. So you can see my costumes here. We've got the costume 1 here, sends us back to, or swaps our position so that my position becomes player 2's position and vice versa. Number 2 is a time bomb, and there's a whole bunch of other ones that we'll get through in the next little while. But we're going to start working on that first one that says arrow, which means, switch us back and forth, switch our players between player 1 and player 2. Basically swap your position with another player. We're going to code that inside this defined power-up. So it's going to figure out which player was touched, and it needs to know which costume it's wearing. By the time we enter this code, it already has that information, because we've taken one of these blocks that we created, this custom block, and we placed it here inside our collision detection. So if either of our players are touching the power-up, then it's going to run this catch power-up code, and it's going to feed it these parameters, the information that it needs to run. What information is it looking for? First of all, it wants to know which player touched it. Now, I was a little confused last week. I think I finally figured out by why we did touching player 1 here. How does it know between player 1 and player 2? Well, this is a Boolean variable here, meaning it can only have two positions, 1 or 0. So right now when we go catch power up, touching player 1, what it's going to tell it is, if I'm player 1, it's going to make that variable a 1. If not, it's going to leave it at 0. Those are only two options. So just using this, we can feed into this catch power up the information about which player touched it. It's either going to be a 1 or a 0. We're also going to feed in the power up name, which is our costume number. And our costume numbers are going to be anything from 1 to 8 because we have 8 different costumes. So with that information in it, this code can now carry on running and do what it needs to do to have the power up activate. Let's go ahead and start coding this right now. So we're going to code the first power up, which is power up number 1. So let's grab an if statement in here, and we'll grab an equal sign, which you can find under your green operators. So we're going to say if power up name is equal to 1. It knows what our power up was based on the costume number, right? So let's go grab a power up name. We can actually pull it right out of here and pop it into that space. If power up name is equal to 1, which means we're wearing the first costume, then what we have to do is store the information about where I am and where player 2, I'm player 1, where player 1 is and where player 2 is, right? Now we can't simply say go to player 2's position, because when player 2 teleports to player 1's position, now its position is going to be the same as player 1's position, and so whichever one goes first is going to land on top of the second one, and the second one's not going to know to go to the other player's position because it'll already have moved. So we have to store both those positions. All we want to do is store the X and Y position of player 1 and of player 2. I've created a bunch of variables here, 4 variables to be specific. P1X, P1Y, P2X, and P2Y. That's our X and Y coordinates for both of our players. So we're going to say, so we need to set these variables now. Let's go set variable. We'll go P1X. And we're just going to set it to the X position of player 1. But power-up doesn't know, the power-up sprite doesn't know the X position of player 1. That's why we're going to have to go over. We can't just use the blocks we normally do to tell our X position, which are these ones, because this will only return the X position of the power-up. It won't tell us the X position of player 1. So to figure that out, we got to go to our sensing blocks and use this very powerful block called the reporter block. I've got some saving problems here. That shouldn't interfere with us too badly, so let's just ignore what's happening up here. So the reporter block tells us information about other sprites in the game. Let's change this from stage to the name of our sprite here on the right-hand side, player 1. And now you can see we have access to all the information we need about player 1, its X position, its direction, its costume. We just need its X position, so we'll say if set player 1 X position, P1X, that variable, to the X position of player 1. So far, so good. I'm just going to duplicate this sprite so we can make changes to it. Let's go P1Y now, and we'll set it to the Y position of player 1. Let's duplicate again. We're looking for player 2's X position now, and we'll change it to the X position of player 2. And let's duplicate that again. And we'll go player 2, you guessed it, Y. We're looking at the Y position of player 2, and we're making it the Y position of player 2. So we've only just stored the information about where these two guys live, where player 1 and player 2 lives now. Now we can go back to player 1 and player 2 and tell them to switch positions. We're going to do that with an event. So we'll create an event here, and we'll broadcast it. We're going to call that new event swap positions. If you don't already have it there, you can just type in new message and type in swap positions. Okay, we'll go back to player 1 now, and we'll tell, sorry, I already did this. Let's do it live though. When I receive swap positions, I want to go to the position. So let's go to XY, and I'm going to want to go to the position. So I'm player 1 right now. I want to go to player 2's position. So we'll tell it go to player 2's X and player 2's Y. We can do the same thing over on player 2. I've already gone ahead and done that. So you can see when I receive swap positions, I go to player 1's X and player 1's Y. So there we go. And so let's try testing that out now. We can launch our game. We don't want to go through too much trouble. I'm just going to generate a game here where there's a replacement block. There we go. That's the proper block that we're looking for right here on the towards the bottom left of the screen. I could navigate there, but just to cheat, to make this go faster, I'm just going to pick up player 2 and move him right next to that block so that we don't have to actually go navigating through our maze to find it. Let's max the screen out here, and I'm just going to hit the S button to go down. And as soon as I do that, you should see that my player should change from red to blue. And so I move it. So when I hit the S key, he turns blue. And now when I move, you can see I'm moving W and S here. I'm going up and down on the right-hand side. I have moved over to the other side of the screen. And now the blue player is over here, and he can move around with his arrow keys. So far so good. That was a not too hard one. Let's carry on here, and we will move to the second power-up now. The second power-up, let's have a look at our costumes. The second power-up, sorry, we're back to our power-ups here, is the time bomb. That's quite a bit more complicated because it's an inventory item. When we grab a time bomb, it's not just going to go off. We're going to have it sitting in our inventory ready to go until we are ready to explode it. So that means we're going to have to set up an inventory system. To do that, we're going to create a special kind of variable called the list variable. You might recall that we used list variables way back in our Magic 8-Ball game. We created a list of different funny things the Magic 8-Ball could say, and then it picked one randomly from the list. So a list variable is just a special kind of variable that holds multiple pieces of information. If you were doing a list variable for colors, you might have blue, red, green, etc. on there. So rather than storing one piece of information, red, it stores a bunch of different pieces of information all about whatever it is that you're trying to gather information about here. So we're going to create a list saying, what power-ups do I have in my hand right now? Let's go back to our code here. So we need a second if statement for detecting our second kind of block here. So let's add another if statement. And we'll go if power up name. Let's actually just grab this from here. I'm going to move my cursor over the equal sign, go duplicate. And now I have that code. If power up name equals 2, which is the costume number of our time bomb, then we need to do some stuff. Now we're going to add a new custom block here. We have to do a bunch of stuff here to process this power up. We need to add the name to the inventory list. We're going to be doing that over and over again in our code. So rather than coding it all inside here, we're going to create another custom block that's just simply going to take the power up information and add it to a list that we can refer to later to figure out whether that's in our inventory. So we're going to go ahead and create a new custom block that's called add to inventory. Let's go ahead and do that. My blocks, make a block. We're going to type in add to inventory, and that's the name of our thing. Just like in our last block, we're going to add some parameters to it, meaning some extra information that this block needs in order to run. What information does it need? It needs the same kind of information that our other custom block needed. It needs to know which player grabbed the power-up, and it needs to know which power-up got grabbed. So let's go ahead and add that information. I'm going to click on add an input, which will let us add kind of a variable to this, and that variable is going to be called power-up name, the same way we did before. And that's going to be the information, a number from 1 to 8, saying which costume we're wearing or which power-up we just grabbed. And we're also going to add a Boolean here. Remember, a Boolean is a special kind of variable that can only be 0 or 1. We're going to add that, and that Boolean is going to be, we're going to call it player to give power up to. I guess we should use the camel case here. which is capitalizing the letters between the words so we can tell between the words, or we could just add spaces because we're in Scratch and it's very forgiving. But later on, we get into more serious coding in languages like C+ or C#. You'll have to use this code if you want to put more than one word into a variable, right? We'll have to use capital letters so that we can tell the words apart to make it easier to read. Okay, once we go okay on that, you'll see we have a brand new custom block here called add to inventory. And we've got the definition of that block here. So it's got little empty slots here where whatever information goes into here is going to go into this variable. Whatever goes here is going to be the name of the power-up, which costume it's wearing, and whatever goes into here is going to be which player grabbed it. So we've got our new add to inventory block. We can drag that into our if statement now, so that if our power-up name is equal to 2, which means we've touched a time bomb, we can add the time bomb to our inventory. So let's go add to inventory. What are we going to add to inventory? Well, we need to add the power-up name, which is actually the same as the costume name. So we're going to make that power-up name be equal to the costume name by putting it into this hole. So let's go to looks. We'll go costume number. We'll change that to costume name. So add to inventory the costume name, which is going to be alarm clock or clock, I think. Let's go have a look at the code. Yeah, clock. We're going to add that word to our code, and we need to know who to add it to. So we're going to add that to the player that was touched. And we actually have that variable up here at the top under catch power up. So I'm just going to drag that into there. So now this piece of code over here, add to inventory, knows which item to add and who to give it to. All right, let's go over to add to inventory, and we'll just code this so that it adds to the list. It's a little trickier than you think it's going to be, though. So the first thing we need to do is add an if-else. We're going to check and see if we're giving this to player 1 or to player 2, and depending on who that player to give is, we're going to behave differently, of course. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to say if the player to give is equal to 1, basically. Now there's an interesting little trick here that I want to show you. So player to give, we can grab that object from here. Now normally I would go if player to give is equal to 1, but because this is a Boolean variable, which means there's only 2 possibilities, 1 or 0, Scratch will understand that if player to give without an equal is basically the same as if player to give is equal to 1. The only alternative is player to give is equal to 0, which means there's nothing in it, basically. And nothing is 0, which is player 2. So if player to give will automatically mean player 1's information will go into here, and player 2's as 0 will by default go into here because it's in the else. Just an interesting little code thing. You don't have to code it this way, but later on when you get into more sophisticated coding languages like Python and C++ and C#, you're going to have to understand this, that you can do if statements without an operator, without a greater than or an equal to sign. So we're going to do this just as a learning experience here. If player to give, meaning player 1 is the player we've selected, we can add this item to our list, but only if it's not already on the list. So we need another if statement inside this if statement, checking to see if it's already in our inventory. So let's grab a not sign from our operators. If not, now we need to check the contents of our list now. So we're going to go back down to our variables, and we're going to grab this item here that says contains. P1 inventory contains thing. So it's just this block third from the bottom of our list variables that says contains in it. We're going to drop that in here. So we're looking to see what the list doesn't contain. So if the list called P1 inventory doesn't contain power-up name, if it's not already there, then we're going to add it to the list. If it does, then it's going to ignore this whole thing and do nothing here, basically, which means their power-up's not going to be added to our inventory. Okay, so if it's not on the list, let's add it to the list. We can go to our list variables here and go add a thing to the list. The list is P1 inventory. We want it to stay that way. And what's the thing we're going to add to the list? Oh, we're unique to this in the if, not in the else. We're going to add the power-up name. So let's grab that from there. So add the power-up name to the inventory. Good. Now the else statement here is if player to give is player is 0, which means player 2. So if player 2 is doing that, we're just going to do the same thing here except for player 2. So I can make a duplicate of this interior if statement here. I'm going to move my mouse over the word if and right click and duplicate. That will give me that whole block of code. We don't have to change very much here. We're just going to change both references to player 1 to player 2. So if it's player 2, we're going to add that power-up name to player 2's inventory. Okay, let's test this out here. Now we already have some code here that's going to make our interface show up here. I've gone ahead and coded this for you guys because it's not integral to the game, and I thought that we were going to be short of time with this because we've got so much coding to do. Let's go have a quick look at P1 inventory and just see how that code works. So basically, we're checking to see if P1 inventory contains the name, meaning like a clock. If P2 inventory contains the word clock, then we're going to set our ghost effect on the clock to 0, which means it's going to be fully visible. If not, it's going to be partially visible. It's going to be a ghost effect of 80, which will make it look kind of faded out and washed out like this. So right now, these are clones that I've created on the screen here and positioned them very properly. And those clones will only listen to the script if their costume number is the same as the alarm clock. So what should happen when player 1, I've got the wrong thing going here. Let me just delete this from our list. I can't do it from here. Let me just minimize this. Just want to refresh my list here. Okay, because I don't want to restart the game and reset our variables. Okay, so when player 1, who's this red player, steps on top of an alarm clock, we're going to see the word clock added to this list, and it's going to become visible here because this clone is going to recognize that P1 inventory now contains that name, and it's going to change itself from this setting, ghosted, to the non-ghosted thing. It's going to show up on the list here. This code here on the right just creates the clones. It positions them on the screen. You can see all these clones are just being very precisely positioned on the screen based on where we drop stuff. Okay, so now we're ready to test this out. Let's find a time bomb. Let's see if one exists here. It doesn't. Let's just keep refreshing the game reset until we actually get a time bomb. There's one at the top of the screen here. I'm just going to drag my player 1 over there. And let's make it big now. Oh, that's actually not a time bomb. It's hard to see in this tiny little view. So I recommend you always play the game in the maximized view. But the only problem is you can't hack the game and move these characters around in the maxed out view. It's actually set up so that you can't cheat that way. I can't drag this no matter how hard I try. Okay, so I'm in the game right now, and when I hit the D key, I will move to the right and step on top of the clock key. And you're going to see those two things happen. It's going to be added to the inventory, and this is going to undarken it, or it's going to, it's going to unghost itself. So let's try it out. We move over, and there you go. We can see our clock now, and our clock has appeared on our inventory list. Because it's on the list, it means it will show up here as well. As soon as we remove it from the list, let's go ahead and remove it from the list. Just going to click on the X here in the maxed out view. And again, it disappears right away. If it's not on the list here, then it's not going to show up. I can show you quickly how that works one more time here. If we go into our list and find a different name, like eraser, for example, or no, eraser. Yeah, eraser is one that we can use. So if I type in the word eraser into this list here, I don't know if I can do it for the max view. Yeah, we can go plus. No, we can't. We have to do it from this view. So I'll go plus. Let's zoom a little to make it easier. I'm going to type in the word eraser, and as soon as I add that word, you're going to see the eraser for player 1 will get unchecked. Now this interface that I've created here with clones serves two purposes. Number one, it tells you whether you have an eraser in your inventory, but it also tells you how to activate the eraser, right? I didn't want to have a whole bunch of key controls in here, so I could have mapped this out to a different key so that you have 4 keys to move and 1 key for the eraser and 1 key for the time bomb, but then you'd end up with 8 different buttons to control the game instead of 4. And so what I thought was I could set it up so that you can use your movement keys to activate these items by double clicking on them. Now that turned out to be a little bit trickier than I thought it would be in the code. Let me show you the part of the code that I've already added here that controls the double clicking. So in this case, if I wanted to use my eraser, I could double click on the right hand arrow key for player 1, which isn't an arrow, but in fact the letter D. So I can go DD very quickly. And if I press it within 0.2, like 1/5 of a second, that's how much time I have to double click it. Otherwise, it'll be too slow and it'll just read it as a motion key. So it's a really elegant little system we've created here. It's a bit tricky to code, but the nice thing is we only have 4 control keys. And now we've got this nice little interface here that will remind us what we have to do to get this running. So, let me show you the code for double click detection, and that is over here. Check for double taps. Now this code is pretty complicated, and there's so many things nested inside each other. I just thought it would be a little bit too complex to teach. So I've given this to you in your starter file. If you're not working off of a starter file, you can just freeze frame right now and just copy this code if you want to, or go look at my finished code at chromeworks.ca/lessons. You'll find it there. So I don't have to go into all the details here, but I just want to give you a rough idea how this works. It's all triggered by this movement key pressed variable. You'll see that over here in our movement routine, as soon as we press any key to move, so here we press the D key, for example, it activates this probe move block. And the probe move block, as soon as it gets activated, it sets this movement key pressed variable. That's just a 1 or a 0. It's a binary. Again, it's checking, am I pressing a key to move? Yes or no. If I am, then I'm going to come over to this script, which is checking to see if my movement key pressed is equal to 1. It's just running constantly in the background, checking to see whether movement key is pressed. Now, if a movement key is pressed, it's going to go through something very complicated here. I don't want to go through the details, as I said, because there's too many things nested inside each other, and I'm very reluctant to teach you guys how to do this because the logic is just a bit too contorted. So this is just a little beyond your level, guys. But just to summarize, what's happening here is if a movement key is pressed, it's checking for a couple of things. It's checking to see, it basically starts a timer, and you have 0.2 seconds to press the same key over again. So if I'm pressing D to move right, it's checking and waiting to see if within 0.2 seconds, I press that same D key again. If not, this script will just become inactive and nothing will happen. If I am, in fact, pressing the same key and the timer hasn't run out, then we're going to activate a block, a custom block here in this spot. And so this is the only part you do have to add to this script. We're going to create a new custom block here called trigger power, and that's going to actually be the thing that activates our time bomb. So let's go trigger power. We're going to create a brand new block here. So we can't actually add this till we create our custom block. So let's go create our custom block. We'll go to my blocks. We'll go make a block, and we will go trigger power. And we have one piece of information we need to add to that. So let's go add an input, and we're going to call that our direction. We'll just go dir for direction. And that will create our new block here called trigger power direction. And that direction variable is going to be the direction that that we're moving in, or the when we trigger the event. So basically, if we double click on the D key or the right arrow key, that will be the direction or the button that we clicked on. So now that we kind of understand that code, let's go ahead and activate it here. So if our double click was successful, then we're going to do whatever is inside this little if statement here. And what's inside our if statement is going to be a trigger power block with the directions. We have to tell it the direction here so that our code can work properly. And we already have this variable here called double tap direction. That will tell it what direction we double tapped in, so that will allow our code to work. So let's go drop that into that spot from our variables list, double tap direction. Now our trigger power function knows what to do based on what button we pressed. Now there's 4 of them, one for each direction. We're gonna right now just focus on the time bomb, which you can see for our left player is the one towards the edge facing left. So it's going to be when we press double click on the A key, we're going to activate the time bomb. And this little visual indicator here will remind you of that. And if you want to use your time bomb, yes, we have one in our inventory. If I double click my A key, my left movement key, then I will be able to use it in the game. Okay, so let's go and trigger that power. We're going to say if our direction is equal to -90, which is to the left. So let's go if, control, if direction equals -90. So let's go grab an equal sign. And we'll grab this direction from in here, because that's one of the parameters we're going to use. If direction equals -90, which is pointing to the left in Scratch. Now, so we're going to get through that gate, but we have to check for one more thing, which is if our inventory actually contains a clock. So before we activate it, we need to make sure that our list contains that word. So let's add a second if statement. We could do if this and that, of course, but let's do it this way, because it's going to make a little more sense to you guys, I hope. So if, now let's check our inventory. We'll go down to our variables, down to the very bottom where our lists are, and there's one here again that says P1 inventory contains something. If it contains the word clock, we can actually just type in the word clock there. If our inventory contains the word clock, we're going to do a couple of things here. First thing we're going to do is delete that reference. We can only use it once, so we're going to delete item number of clock. So here it is, item number of thing. Hold it, delete. Aha, so we're going to delete something from player 1 inventory. So I'm going to grab the block here that says delete 1 of player inventory. But instead of telling it the number, we're going to tell it to delete the row that contains the item number of clock. So we can double check this. So item number of clock in P1 inventory. Let me just go ahead and add clock back to my inventory because I've accidentally deleted it here. And so now I'm going to get it to check that list. When I go item number of clock, if I double click on that, you'll see it's 1 because number 1 on our inventory list is clock. And so when I drop this into here, it'll delete item number of clock. It'll delete 1, the first item from our inventory, basically. Let's drop that into here. So this will delete this item from the inventory. Let me just click on it here again. You'll see, bang, it's gone. Okay. Now, we're going to also set target player. That's the variable that will tell this again which player it was that actually activated it. We know it's player 1 because we're inside the player 1 sprite right now. So we're just going to go set a variable. So let's go back to our variables. Set target player, the player who actually invoked this thing, to 1. That means, so now we know that player 1 is activating it. And so now we're actually going to trigger our bomb. That can't happen over here inside player 1 though, because we actually have to have the event happen inside a special time bomb sprite that I've created I'm covering it up with my head here, but let me zoom in to show you better. So there's a new sprite here called Time Bomb in the bottom right. It's on the wrong graphic right now. Let's go back to the proper graphic. You can see the clock graphic is set up, plus some explosion graphics, plus a final white graphic box here for the area that's going to be destroyed. The walls that are going to be destroyed are going to be covered up by white, and those will not be functional for the rest of the game. Okay, so we'll go back to our code here, back to player 1, and we're going to add a new event down here, broadcast, from our events menu, and we're going to go new message and go explode bomb. There we go, explode bomb. So let's go over to our time bomb right now. And we're going to tell it when it receives explode bomb. Now we can put it through the motions of actually exploding. So let's go ahead and inside our time bomb graphic here, let's create some, well, first of all, let's have it hide at the beginning before we start coding it. So let's go in green flag, collect hide. We don't want this to be visible until we need it. All right, so we're going to go explode bomb. So what are we going to do? The first thing we have to do is we're going to position this properly, and that has to do with layers as well. We want it to be in front of the map, but behind our character. So we're going to have to do a little bit of playing around with layers here to make sure it's in the right spot. Let's tell it to go to the back layer, and then we'll tell it to go forward 3 layers from the back. So that should bring it close enough to the front that we're still, that it is behind our players, but in front of the map. That's where we want it to be. And we can tell it to show. And then I'm going to go switch costume to a bomb. We want it to go to the first costume, of course. So let's go switch costume to a clock. Sorry, not bomb. There we go. We switch costume to clock. Now, where does it go on the screen, right? This depends on who actually triggered the bomb. So let's put an if statement in here and get it to figure out who triggered the bomb. If target player, which is the variable we just said a minute ago, is equal to 1, this is going to be an if else. I made that mistake again. Don't. Okay. Let's get rid of that. So if target player is equal to 1, then we're going to go to player 1. So let's go to our motion blocks. We'll just grab a go to random position block and we'll change it to player 1. And otherwise, we'll go to player 2, of course. So if target player isn't 1, we know it's going to be player 2. All right, this is a time bomb, so we need enough time for you to get away. What I envisioned this bomb working as was you're being chased by another player. You drop a time bomb behind it. If you time it properly, you'll have time to get out of the way, but have the person chasing you get stuck inside the bomb explosion radius and killed. So we'll go wait 3 seconds. You can change that wait time however you like. Just play test the game a little bit, and if you find that it's not working the way you want it to, you can make it explode faster or shorter, just depending on what your preferences are. Okay, so we placed our bomb at the back behind this black curtain so that if you weren't close to it, you wouldn't see that it had been placed. But once it starts exploding, we need to bring it to the front again so that it's visible across the whole screen. We want the explosion obviously to be something that's not hidden behind anything, because it's hard to miss an explosion after all. So let's tell it to go to the front here. We'll just go to our looks menu here, and we will grab an item here that towards the bottom that says go to front. We're going to switch costumes here. So let's go change costume or switch costume to, and we'll grab our first explosion block. There's our costumes. Yeah, it's just called explosion. And then from there, we need to go through 11 costume changes. So let's go to our control blocks. We'll grab a repeat times 11. And we're just gonna go switch to next costume. So here's our costume. Yeah, there we go. Just wanted to see what that looked like. So let's just go looks next costume. And at the end, we want the final costume. Let's see what this looks like. So switch costume to go to front. I'm just going to pull this part out and have a look at what it looks like on the screen. I'm going to hide that list that we don't need anymore. And let's just try activating this bit of code here to see what this bomb's going to look like. There we go. What if we went 12 instead of 11? I'm just kind of curious about that. There we go. And then we end up with the white costume at the end here. That's what we want it to be. So yeah, let's make that 12 instead of 11. This is a little bit different from the documentation, guys, but don't worry about it. Follow what I'm doing here. All right, so we're going to go next costume 12 times until we end up at this spot here. And then we're going to go back to the back layer again, and then up one. So we want it in front of the map, but behind everything else. So let's go again. We'll rearrange the layering order. We'll go to our looks menu. We'll say go to the back. The back layer is where our maze is, and then we'll tell it to go forward one layer so that it's in front of the maze, but behind everything else in the game. And all right, let's test this out now. So I'm going to pick up my player 1 character, the red character, move him next to a time bomb so that he can pick one up. Let's do it right here. That's good. Now let's max out our screen so we can see better. I'm going to move on top of the time bomb. There we go. Now I can go wherever I want to. It's in my inventory, so you can see. And so I can just move wherever I want. Let's get down a long hallway that I can run down. Well, I grabbed an eraser too, which isn't going to work yet. So I'm just looking for some place I can run to where I have time to get away from this bomb. These bombs are quite dangerous, as you can imagine. But it doesn't really matter because I haven't set myself to die yet anyway. So let's just trigger it here. So I'm going to double click on the A key. You're going to see that the bomb's going to disappear. Then 3 seconds later, it's going to blow up. Let's try it out. Double click and it disappears from our inventory. I'll move out of the way and then boom, my bomb has blown up and you can see those walls have completely disappeared. And so a big part of our map no longer exists now because of that, which is kind of cool. Beautiful. So our time bomb is working properly. Notice that I haven't added any sounds here. We're going to do a stripped down version of this game today without any sound effects. I would love to hear what you guys do. If you can't find sound effects, again, I would recommend you try a website, freesound.org. It's fantastic. Let me just show you that. freesound.org. It doesn't cost anything. You do have to create a user account to download sounds, but you can download any sound you want. Like, let's just look for explosion here. Whoop. I typed it wrong. Let's try that one more time. Explosion. So any sound effects you want for video games, this website's really fantastic. Let's preview this explosion sound. And if we don't like that one, there's lots of other ones to choose from as well. Just download it, import it back into Scratch, and you're good to go. The other alternative, of course, is just to design your own explosions. You can just record your own voice even. You could just go to your sounds menu, go record, and do something like this. A little bit of playing around, maybe change the pitch. Let's make it slower. Something like that might work really well. As I said, I'm not going to bother with sound effects here, but there's lots of ways to get good sound effects into your game. We're not going to bother today. Okay, so our bomb is working beautifully now. Let's move on to the next item. Okay, so the next item on our inventory is the proximity bomb, which I've designed to look a little bit like a stick of dynamite. It looks a little better from farther away, of course, the way these sprites often do. And so the way the proximity bomb works is it's going to sit there on the map for quite a long time. I think 10 seconds is what we set it up for. And if at any time during that 10 seconds anyone moves close to that dynamite stick, it will automatically blow up. So it's a good way to guard a doorway or something and make sure that no one tries to sneak through it. As soon as they approach it, they'll die and get sent back to the beginning again. All right, so there's a couple of things we have to code to get that ready. Starting in the power-up. So we're going to go to the power-ups again, and we're back in this catch power-up block here. So we're going to say if power-up name is equal to 3 now. We could actually just duplicate this code because everything else is identical here. So let's right-click on this, duplicate it, and we'll say if power-up is 3, which is our prox bomb, we're going to add that name prox bomb to our list for the player touched. Okay, so let's go back to player 1. We're going to do player 2 at the end of this process once all the code is done, and then we can make a few changes. We're just going to drag a whole bunch over. If we did it piece by piece, it would just take too long to go through. I think this is a more efficient way to handle it. Okay, so let's go back to player 1 and look at his code. So we're going to say if, and we need to know our direction as well, right? So our prox bomb is going to be down from here, right? So if, here it is, direction is equal to, so direction, the prox bomb is going to be down, which is 90, 180. So if our direction is 180 is what we're looking for here. So we're going to do quite a bit of stuff here that's duplicated from the last time. So I'm going to take all of this code for the clock and I'm going to duplicate it. So I'm going to move my mouse cursor over the word if here. I'm going to duplicate. Now we just need to change a few things around here. So I'm going to change the direction to 180 instead of -90. I'm going to change the word clock here to the word dynamite. Make sure you spell it properly. It has to be spelled the same way it is in your sprite list. So just double check that as D-Y-N-A-M-I-T-E. You're going to have to spell it twice. If your dynamite doesn't blow up, by the way, that's the first thing I would check. Is with kids like you guys, you can never tell whether you spelled the word properly. Okay, P1 inventory, target player still 1, but we're just going to broadcast a different message here. We're going to broadcast a prox bomb. So let's go new message, prox bomb explodes maybe. Okay. So let's go over to our prox bomb right now. We're going to be using a ton of code from the time bomb. So I think we should actually just grab that code over for the time bomb and try modifying it. So let's go over to the time bomb and we're going to grab this bit of code here and drag it over to the prox bomb. We want the when green flag clicked as well, though it's not too hard to duplicate that. There we go. Let's clean up the blocks. There's my green flag clicked. Okay, so when I receive explode prox bomb, let me have a look at my reference code here and make sure everything's the same. There's going to be a few things different, but not too many of them. So I have my prox bomb here. So we want to go to the back. We want to, pretty well everything's the same until we get to switch costume. And of course, we're going to switch a costume here to bomb, which is the first costume with our dynamite stick in it. And we still want to go to the target player. That part's still good. We still want to wait 3 seconds before it's armed. Now, here's the part where the prox bomb works. Actually, the prox bomb doesn't look like it expires at all. It just keeps running. I forgot the way that we set this up. So after it explodes, I think everything else is going to work properly. Let me just, yeah, I think that the explosion is going to work nicely here. We're just going to test in a second. So the only difference is we need to add a block of code here that says if a player is too close to it, we trigger the explosion. So we're going to use a wait until command for that. Those are always handy. Wait until it's under your control blocks. When you want the script to entirely freeze, you don't need it to keep checking anything, just until one thing happens. And what the thing is going to happen here is our distance is going to be right. So let's go distance 2 is less than something. So this is a complicated script here. Let's add an or statement. We're going to put the or statement inside our wait until. Then we need to say if distance to player 1 is less than 20. So let's grab a distance 2, which is under our sensing blocks. And we're going to say distance to player 1. There it is. If distance 2, we need a less than sign, which is right over here under our operators. If distance to player 1 is less than 20, and we're going to duplicate this. So move your mouse over the less than button and then duplicate. And we're going to change this one to player 2. So if player 1 or player 2 approaches the bomb, it doesn't care who approaches it. Oh, I put that in the wrong place. Let me fix that. So if player 1 or player 2, this is a little tricky because of my space here. There we go. If player 1 or player 2 approaches the bomb, then it's going to blow up. The wait 3 seconds should be before. Sorry, I put that in the wrong place. So it takes 3 seconds to arm itself, and then the next person to approach it gets blown up, basically. And there's not much you can do about that, I guess, because it doesn't look like it expires. That might be something after playtesting that we figure out that we need to modify. But for now, let's leave that and see how it goes. Okay, so I think we can test that out. So again, we're going to test it the way we test everything else out. We're going to click the green flag. We're going to see if we can find a prox bomb on the screen. And if we don't have one, let's just keep clicking the green flag until a dynamite stick appears. There's one right there. So let's move player 1 right next to it. And of course, without a wall in between. So let's see. Yeah, I need to move it to a slightly different location. Whoa! So I just clicked on the background instead of clicking on the character, and that's messed everything up. It's going to be tricky to get that back to where it was before again. So let's just go green flag and try one more time. Let's keep going until we find a prox bomb. There's a prox bomb at the bottom of the screen, I think. There we go. Beautiful. I'm going to be more careful clicking. Now I'm going to grab red and drag him over beside the bomb. There we go. So let's max out our screen again, and we'll give this a test. So when I move on top of the bomb, it appears in our inventory, and you can see that the double click is double click on down. So 2 clicks of the S key. I'm going to have to be careful to move out of the way within 3 seconds here. So let's go ignite it. And now let's move away. All right, so our prox bomb is armed now. Nothing's happening until we get a little closer. Let's approach it slowly. And so we can still see it here, but until we get within 20 pixels of it, it won't explode. So let's see how far 20 pixels is. Are we close enough? There we go, boom. And so you can see it'll be something that's on the screen there. You won't really be able to do anything with it. So we haven't died, unfortunately, yet, because we don't have our death mechanic set up properly. We're going to be doing that a little bit later, but you get the idea. Okay, so our prox bomb is working properly now. Beautiful. Let's move on to our next item. Okay, our next item, number 4, is going to be the eraser, which works kind of like a bomb. It gets rid of an area of the maze, but in this case, it doesn't kill anyone. It just simply gets rid of walls in front of you to help you escape a little more easily. So let's go ahead. We're back in the power-up sprite again. We're looking at this catch power-up block, and we're going to duplicate it one more time. So we're going to duplicate the if statement, like so. And inside here, we're going to change this power-up name to 4, and the rest of it works fine. These aren't all going to function the same way, but all the power-ups that are in our inventory function the same way. Ones that aren't in the inventory, they have a little bit of different code inside them. Okay, back to player 1 again. Let me switch to player 1 here as well so that I can see what's going on. And we can say if direction equals 90, which is to the right. You can see on our screen here that the eraser is to the right, so that's going to trigger it. So let's duplicate again. I think we can do most of the same stuff here. So let's duplicate this if statement. We'll drop it down here. And we're going to say if direction equals 90, which is to the right. And P1 inventory contains eraser. Let's change this to eraser. And we'll change this to eraser as well. Make sure you spell it properly. There we go. Set target player to 1. Again, we need to know where we're exploding this thing, even though it's not technically exploding. And there we go. And we're going to broadcast a new message here that says create eraser. Okay, so now let's go over to our eraser. Our eraser doesn't have an explosion graphic on it. All it is a square block that's going to disappear basically when it gets invoked here. So the code for that is not too tricky at all. I think we front loaded all the hard stuff here for you guys. Let's go over to the eraser. Whoa, it looks like we've already got some code here in the eraser. I don't know if I forgot to delete that inside the starter file or not, but let's just go over it really quickly. So when green flag clicked, we're going to go to the back layer and then go forward 1. That's to bring it in front of the map, and then we're going to hide. So it's going to be sitting there waiting, hidden until it's invoked, basically. So it's already at the right layer, and it's just sitting there waiting for the create eraser message to be received. So when I received create eraser, we went ahead and did that inside the power-ups, right? Did we create? We didn't broadcast the message. Darn it. So when it receives that create eraser command, we're going to just show it. And if target player equals 1, go to player 1, otherwise go to player 2. So that eraser is going to go to one of these 2 positions, basically. Okay, so that shouldn't be too hard to demo here. Let's go click the green flag and see if we can find an eraser. I think this should all work beautifully. And we don't have an eraser in this incarnation of the game, so let's keep clicking till we find one. Where she stops, nobody knows. I think I see one at the bottom here. Yeah, there's my eraser. So I'm going to drag myself over there. And I'm on the wrong side of a wall, so let's move myself again, then max myself out. Okay, so let's go try that out. I'm going to go WASD. I'm going to go down and grab it. The eraser appears in my inventory. So far, so good. Can take my time here because it doesn't matter when I invoke this. Okay, so let's say I'm stuck in this wall. I want to get through to the other side. I can't move. So let's just use my eraser. I'm going to double click on my D key. And then boom, those blocks disappear. And I can go through that wall magically and get a little shortcut to the ending. That's going to stay there until, of course, somebody else grabs an eraser. There's only one eraser allowed on the screen because we're not creating clones here. So explosions and, to the best of my knowledge, explosions and eraser marks, there's only can only be 3 of them on the screen at any given time, right? And if you, so as you start to blow these things up, they're going to move around because we're not creating clones. We're just simply creating a white splotch over the screen that's an actual object. And so we don't want you blowing up too much of the map, of course. Okay, let's move on to the next item. Okay, our next timer up, number 5 on the list, is the eyeball, which is going to expose the whole map and give you a 4-second view of the entire screen. So that one's not too difficult to implement at all. Let's just start. We're back in our power-ups again. We're still looking at the catch power-up where we've added all our other if statements detecting which block it is that we grabbed. We're going to duplicate this again just so we don't have to redo something. We'll change that number to 5 if power-up name equals 5. Let's trash the middle because we don't actually have to add this to our inventory. It's not an inventory item. So all we have to do inside here is set a variable. Let's go ahead and set a variable, and the variable is going to be called I-enabled time, and we're going to set it to where the timer is, and we're basically just holding down a stopwatch here that's keeping track of when the moment is that the I-enable started, and then we're going to keep comparing that to the current time, and when the difference between them is more than 4, meaning 4 seconds has passed, then we're going to re-hide the map again. To finish that off, we have to go to our mask blocks, which are the black blocks that are covering our screen up. So let's go over there. And you notice that in here, when I started the clone, there's a little blank spot here beside the OR statements. We left that blank on purpose because we didn't need it yet, but now's the time to fill it up. So we're going to tell it to that we're going to hide these blocks if our timer is less than 4. So it's a little bit complicated, though. We have to say timer minus I-enabled time is less than 4, because that's the moment that we started our timer, and then we're going to end our timer with where the timer is right now. So let's go grab a couple of things. We'll grab a minus sign and a less than sign. Remember, the less than sign is the arrow pointing to the left. So let's drop the minus sign into the left part of the less than sign. We're going to go grab a timer under our sensing blocks. Timer minus I-enabled time. So let's go to variables, I-enabled time. If that number is less than 4, so if the amount on the timer is less than 4 seconds after the time the I-enabled time, then our blocks are going to be hidden. Otherwise, they're going to show, right? So until when that number gets more than 4, our blocks are going to hide again. Let's drop all of that inside that last OR statement block. Let's make some room here. Remember to grab it by the inner block, which is the less than sign, and drop it in there. All right, so now we have to test it. Let's restart our game, and there is an eyeball where we lucked out. There's an eyeball right there. So I'm going to move my red dot over to there. Oh, it's in the wrong spot, so let's move it to the other side of the wall. There we go. And theoretically, when I hit the A button to move left, my screen should disappear for 4 seconds. Here we go. And it's not working at all. Every once in a while I do this and this isn't working. Okay, let's test it. So we have an eyeball on the screen already, as you can see, right in this spot here. So let's move our player 1 character right next to it. There we go. Let's max out our screen, and then we'll step on top of it. And if this was coded properly, this should view the map for 4 seconds. Let's check it out. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom, and then it hides again. Perfect, that works beautifully. That should work just as well for player 2 because there's really no extra code that needs to be added there. We're all good to go. Okay, on to the next one. Okay, our next item in our power-up list is this spiral icon, which is an inventory item that whenever you need to, you can use it to teleport to a random spot on the screen. So if you're facing certain death or have to try to get around something, that's one way that you can do it. So we're going to go back to our power-up code, same place we've been coding everything else here. We're going to say if power-up name is equal to 7, we don't need these delete items. Let's drop those out. And we actually need this to look like the other inventory items. So let's go copy the add or duplicate the add inventory from one of these other blocks. They're all identical, so it doesn't really matter. There we go. We've added this to our inventory. Now Scratch has to know what to do when we want to invoke that item in our inventory. So let's go back to player 1, and we're going to go back to the code that's telling us what to do when we trigger the trigger power function here. So we've got 3 different directions here. We're going to add the 4th direction now. Yeah, most of this isn't relevant, but if direction equals, yeah. So we're going to need, let's just duplicate this last guy, direction equals 90. We're going to grab this whole block of code and duplicate it, but we don't need any of the contents of the we actually do want a little bit of it, eh? Okay, so let's attach this down below here. We're going to grab the set target player and the broadcast and get rid of those. We'll trash those, but we'll keep everything else here. So we're going to say if direction equals 0, which means we're pressing up, set P1 inventory to contain, or if P1 inventory contains spiral, delete item spiral. We're going to remove that from the inventory if we use it. Now, we're going to basically put ourselves on the map the same way we put these power-ups on the map. We're going to start at the left-hand corner and then get ourselves to pick a random number from 1 to 16 across the right and from 1 to 16 across the top and the bottom, and that will put us in a random position. So there's 3 blocks we have to add to that. Let's start with a go to block. Go to XY. We're going to go to the top left of the screen, which is minus 152, positive 152, 152Y. Then we're going to change X by a random number from 0 to 19. So let's go, okay, let's actually grab a multiplication symbol first, because whatever number we pick, we're going to multiply it by 16, which is the size of our grid. Let's go pick a random number from 0 to 19. So again, if this is 0, then we'll stay where we are and plunk ourselves in our X position and to there. If the next open slot is 19 over there, and it's just going to keep adding 19 for every one of these random numbers we pick, and multiplying it by 16. Sorry, it's going to, let's explain that one more time. So whatever number we pick randomly from 0 to 19, it's going to multiply it by 16, and that way we're going to make sure that our guys are always properly spaced on the screen. The spaces between the blocks are always 16. Okay, let's plunk that into our change X. We'll grab it by the multiplication sign. There we go. And we need to do the same thing to our Y. So let's go ahead and we'll say change Y. Let's go to our motion blocks. Change Y by, and we need the same random number combination, so we're going to duplicate it here and pop it into that hole. The only difference is we're going to say minus 16 here for the Y because we're going down instead of across, and that should pop us to a new location. So let's give that a test now. So we'll go back to player 1, and we'll plunk me down next to the spiral. Wrong place, up here maybe. All right, so I'm going to put it in my inventory. I'll go down and drop it. There we go. Now it's in my inventory. And now when I double click the W key to go up, it should teleport me to a new spot on the screen. Let's try it out. There we go, and I popped to a new spot. Excellent. Now again, you'll probably want a sound effect to go when that happens, but I'm just not bothering because we're just taking too much time here, and I really want to keep this moving along smoothly today. Okay, beautiful. Okay, our last item is the turtle power-up, which will slow down your character for a fixed amount of time, and the coding for that is already done. It's inside of our player 1, or it's mostly done. If we go back to player 1, you'll see that when we tell our character to move, it goes through this very complicated set of if statements that Jeffrey explained to you last week. Basically, we move by default 1, but then we can move an additional 2 for a speed of 3 if we don't bump into a wall. But the other thing is if we haven't been told to slow down by the turtle enabled time here. So this little function here is going to slow us down if our opponent has stepped on the turtle. So we'll only be able to move the default 1 instead of moving 3, basically. And you'll see it working. It's fairly straightforward. So the master code there is mostly done. We just need to go back to our power-ups and add an if power-up is equal to 8. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll duplicate this. If power-up name is equal to 8, we don't need this in our infrastructure because it works right away. Now we need to figure out which player controlled it. So we're going to do something in here where we add another if statement in here. We'll say if player touched. Remember, that'll return a 1 if player 1 touches it, and if player 2 touches it, it'll stay at 0, right? So this actually needs to be an if else. Sorry, if else. So if player touched, let's go back to our custom blocked where we'll, where is that? It's inside the definitions of player touched. Oh, there it is, right here. So we can grab player touched. We'll just grab it out of here and pop it into here. If player touched, set turtle player 2 enable time to timer. So let's go set variable turtle player 2. So if player 1 touches it, we're slowing turtle player 2 down, right? So we're going to turtle player 2 and we'll set it to timer. And again, that's going to run until the difference between the timer that we set here and the real timer is greater than a certain number. Let's go look at player 1 again, just to remind ourselves. So it's 10. So that's 10 seconds that our character is going to be slowed down for before he resumes his speed again. It'd be nice to have a sound effect for that again, but I'm going to leave that up to you guys again. Back to our inventory, power-ups. So we're going to set that to timer, and otherwise you know that player 2 has grabbed it. So we're just going to duplicate all of this and have the same thing happen, except happen to player 1. There we go, turtle player 1 enabled time to timer. Okay, before we continue, I just realized that I made a minor error here. I didn't change my power-up name to 8, which of course is the number of this power-up. That wouldn't work without that. All right, so we're ready to test now. So let's click the green flag. And there's a turtle right next to the entrance for us. And yeah, it looks like we can go right to it. So that should be very convenient. Just for reference sake, I want you to have a look at how fast the blue player 2 character is moving before the turtle goes. And let's see by comparison what happens after we engage this. So let's do our turtle, boom. And now you can see I'm moving much more slower, 1/3 of the speed I was moving before. I'm going to keep doing that till this 10-second timer runs out, and you'll see I'll suddenly start moving much faster. There we go, and now I'm back to my regular speed again once the 10 seconds is done. So that works beautifully. Okay, so that is all our power-ups. There's a few other things that have to happen. Number one, we're not dying when there's explosions happening. There's a little bit more code left over at the very bottom of this block that we have to handle as well. Yeah, let's do this part first. So we're just going to finish this block here. So I realized as I was playtesting this game that it would be really confusing, especially at first when you started learning this, to know what items you had in your inventory, but also what all the items did before you stepped on them. Because if you're triggering power-ups and you don't know what they do, then you're not really going to be very effective in the game. So to make it easier for you guys, I designed a little bit of text at the side of the screen. It's hidden right now in the starter file, but you can use your eyeball tool to show it up here. Let me max my screen out here and you can see. So there's a little text here that with a picture of a time bomb saying what a time bomb does. It explodes after 5 seconds. There's different costumes here for all the different stuff that these guys can do. Swap, prox bomb, erase, etc. So it's just help text to tell you what these buttons do or what these power-ups do when you land on them. Every time you grab a power-up, this is going to appear in the margin of the screen and let you know what the last thing was that you picked up can do. So to implement this is not too difficult, but we just have to go back to our power-ups again. and we're going to add a couple blocks down to the bottom. First one is we're going to grab an if statement and put it below the other ones here. Control if. We're going to say if player touched, which is, again, this one of these blocks here. I can duplicate this one maybe. So if player touched, meaning if player touched is equal to 1, then we're going to set, oh, this is an if else. Every time we do that player touched, we need an if else. Sorry, so let's grab that and plunk that there. So same idea, just inside an if else statement. So if player touched, then we'll set our help text to 1. Help text is just a variable that's going to let our help text know whether player 1 or player 2 should be visible right now. So we're going to go variables, set help text to 1, help text equals 1, and we're going to do the same thing for the else statement, except we're going to make it 2. So it's going to know which of the 2 should appear. Now, we also need to tell the label which costume is it going to wear, which did we just do. So let's go set another variable underneath here outside the if else. We're going to set help label to power up name, which is a block. Whoa, I've lost my player touched for my add inventory here. I thought I duplicated that. Let's make sure that's in there. Don't leave that blanked. And I'm going to grab, so I need to find a block that says power up name. There's a bunch of them here. I can just duplicate any of them, or you can go grab it from the original block that created it. So set help label to power up name. And so it's going to change, later on we're going to change the costume to match that power-up name. We're going to do that in a second. And then we're going to broadcast a message that's going to get those blocks in action, right? So let's go broadcast, and we're going to say trigger help text. So trigger, whoops, spelled that wrong. Trigger help text, and that's going to be the signal to the help text to unhide itself and to switch to the right costume. So now we're going to go back over to the help text for player 1, which is called text help. And there's another text help 2 that we're going to be editing in a second here. So let's go under text help 1, the main text help. We're going to code it to say, go to the proper spot on the screen. So let's go motion. Go to an XY coordinate. Those numbers are exactly the way they are here, minus 245. Then we're going to hide because we don't want to be visible until we trigger something. Then we're going to set help text to 0 right now because we don't want anything in there, right? So set help text, this is just the initial state, set it to 0. Okay, so when I receive the message is when we're going to spring into action here. So we're going to go, when I receive, trigger help text. We're going to go to the front layer, just in case something happened that dropped us to the back. Go to the front, and we're going to say if our help text is equal to 1, if help text is equal to 1, so let's go help text, which is our variable here. If help text is equal to 1, then we're going to switch our costume to help label to match that label. All right, so help text. So switch costume. Let's go to our looks. Switch costume to help label, which is one of our variables here. Help label. There we go. Okay, last step is we have to show because our label is hidden right now. So let's just add a show here and we should be good to go. So let's try our game out again. I'm going to maximize and I'll just try running over any one of these guys. So through our door, here we go, our eyeball, and you can see we've got our little help text here saying I shows the entire maze. Let's just surf over to another one if we can get there quickly. It might Sometimes these are tricky to get to. And of course we don't want... Okay, I'm just going to cheat again, because who wants to actually navigate through this crazy maze? I'm going to put myself between these two guys, and hopefully, oh, just a little bit over the right here. That should be really nice. So let's try grabbing the eraser. The eraser goes in our inventory. We have the help text there. Beautiful. Let's go down to our turtle. And you can see that it changes to turtle. So we'll want to add a sound effect there every time that we land on something. I kind of think you should have a different sound effect for each of the power-ups. But I'm going to leave it for you guys to try and finish this game up, though, because I'd love to see you guys customize this and turn it into something of your own. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. One important block of code here, which is scoring for us. We don't have an end condition right now where we win the game, and we don't have any condition where we die and go back to the beginning again if we touch a bomb or anything like that. So there's one big block of code over here in player 1 that's going to control all of that. It's under a green flag, so we're going to start a brand new block of code. We are going to need a little bit of prefab code, though. If you have a look at your player 1 code, hopefully you haven't deleted it. Our starter file contained this huge, long and or statement, basically. And we're going to need this a little later. It was so complicated, I thought I should give it to you guys just so that you wouldn't have to try and construct it. Because if it's not in the right order, everything's going to mess up, and wouldn't want to have anything horrible happening. Basically, we're checking to see, we're going to die if I'm touching a prox bomb, explosion, and or if I'm touching a prox bomb and it's not in its original costume, and it's not in its final costume, so we're basically checking for the time bombs. An explosion of a time bomb will kill you, but we don't want, if we touch the white, we don't want to die, and if we touch the bomb itself, we don't want to die. We only want to die when the explosion's happening, so we have to check and see which costume all these guys are wearing, the time bomb and the prox bomb. So anyway, we're going to have a look at that in a second. We're going to need to move that around, and no matter which way you seem to pull at this, it's going to want to fall apart. There's only one place to grab it where it's not going to fall apart, and that is by finding the exact middle of it and grabbing the word or. Any place else that you put it, you're going to change the order around, and you're going to mess everything up. So be super careful about that, guys. And if you accidentally move it, just move it the tiniest little bit just to make sure that you haven't moved it in the wrong place. If, for example, I grabbed it here and I saw, uh-oh, the whole thing's not moving, there's still time now to let go before you rip the whole thing apart and can't remember how it's supposed to go back together again. So be very cautious about that, guys. Okay, so let's put our code together right next to this statement so we don't have to go looking for it later. We're going to go with events, green flag. Let's blow up the size here a little bit. So when I click the green flag, let's set our score to 0. We haven't initialized that yet, I don't think. So let's go set P1 score to 0. Then we need a forever loop in here where we're just going to be checking for stuff. Forever. We're going to say if our X position is greater than 162, which means we've gone off the right-hand edge of the screen, then we're going to score a point. So if X position, which is under motion, is greater than 162, then we're going to go to minus 200. We're going to go back to our start position, basically. So let's go to minus 200, 0. That's our start position. And we're going to change P1 score. We're going to give ourselves a point. So change P1 score by 1. There we go. Now, we're going to check for a couple of other things. Here's where we check for explosion and stuff. So we're going to go if I'm touching one of those crazy bombs. So here's where we're going to grab that bomb, being very, very careful, or that big, giant green stack, being super careful to put it in the right place. So it's a little tricky, right? You have to take the left edge of it and put it into place. If you cannot see the left edge because your block is too big, the thing to do is just shrink your blocks down until you can see everything. And again, grab it by the oar, move it over there until it turns a little glowing white. You can see it there. And then let go and it should pop into the hole. Okay, that is crazy. That's a lot of code in one spot. So if that happens, if we die, all we're going to do is go back to our start position again. So I'm just going to grab that go to and drag it down there. Beautiful. And the other thing we want to do is we want to check and see if I'm touching player 2. So if I'm touching player 2, here's the part where you can kind of kibosh each other. If he gets right to the end, you can still tag your opponent player 2, and send both of you back to the start again. It's a really horrible thing to do to your friend, but you might have to do it at some point if you want to win this game. Kill both players. So we need to do in order to kill both players, we're gonna have to create a little event here that both players will be able to implement at the same time. So I'm gonna go new message, kill both players, and that's gonna be invoked in 2 different spots. So let's find it here under player 1. There should be a kill both players. I just want to find it. Here it is. So when I receive kill both players, nothing much happens. You could do a sound effect or something here again, but I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to send us back to our start position again, which is -200, 0. There we go. And I think that's it for that. So that's going to kill us when we get into an explosion. We should probably test that out right now. So let's go blow up some kind of a bomb here and see if that sends us back to the start again. There's our dynamite, our prox bomb. So I'm just gonna sit next to it. Oh, let's trigger this now. So let's go. Oh, I'm on the wrong side of the wall. Oh, I can use my eraser to get through. Okay, so I'm gonna grab my eraser. Then I'm gonna right click or hit D twice. And there, my walls disappeared. Now I can touch my dynamite. Isn't that handy? So there's my prox bomb. Now my prox bomb should have appeared on the right hand side here. Oh, I don't see it. That's a problem. It's probably behind the explosive, isn't it? Which means I can't be touching it. Okay, we're gonna have a look at that in a second. All right. Yeah, there's something weird going on with that. I'll have a look at that, and I'll probably get back to you at the end of the project with this. But I think we should move on right now, and I'll probably have a little bit to add at the very end in terms of fixing errors and stuff like that after I play test it a little. So that part's all good. Now I think we're basically finished the game. The problem is that player 2 isn't up and running, so we're going to have to do a bunch of copying now and then moving stuff over in order to implement player 2's role here. So there's a bunch of that to do. Let me see if I can catch all of it. So firstly, let's start with player 1 and player 2 inventory, because that's really easy. So right now, player 2 inventory is already done, so that part's fine. Let's go to, I know there was one other block besides player 2 that needed to be updated here. Oh, the text help. So let's go to text help 1, and we'll drag all these objects over to text help 2 to make a copy of them. We're going to have to make some minor changes when we get there. So let's go to text help 2. We'll just clean up the blocks here so we can see everything. And let's have a look at what has to change inside here. So our start position, I know for a start, is going to be different. So our start position is going to be 200 rather than -200, and the Y position is still 45. And here we're going to say if help text is equal to 2, then we're going to show up there. And that will make our help text appear on the right-hand side. Let's just double check that. Well, I'm just going to be moving player 2 around now. See if we can get to a power-up really quickly, and of course we can't. Wow, the power-ups are really not favoring me here. Let's cheat again. Go over to the eraser. Oh, can't maximize. There we go, that should work. And then arrow over to there. Oh, because I was touching a wall, it bounced me away from the wall. Let's just go back and cheat one more time. There we go. And when I step over that, my right hand text help says that I'm on the eraser, which works beautifully. All right, so far so good. Let's actually erase that wall. Oh, I can't erase the wall because I haven't implemented my erasers yet on the player 2. Okay, that's cool. All right, so now we have a bunch of code that we have to copy over to player 2 from player 1. Pretty well everything is the same here. Under player 2, there's just a few things that have to change, eh? So let's go have a quick look at this and see what has to be modified. Okay, we need that little bit of code that we just added now. So I'm going to go over to player 1. I'm going to drag this kill both players over to player 2. And I'm going to change the x coordinate to positive 200, which will bring us back to the start position for player 2. The movement's all good. There's a little bit of code missing here inside this green flag event. Remember, we just added that part at the last second here. So let's go and find that under player 1. And this is that complex code that you didn't do. Let's go find that. Where are you? This is the timer code for double clicking. Here it is. So inside there, we need a block that says trigger power up double tap direction, and that part will all just work fine. I'm just going to drag that over to the to player 2 and see if I can find it right there. All right, that works beautifully now. All right, now the trigger power, we don't need to have, we do. All right, yeah, so this is one that we're gonna have to do this entire trigger power block. We're gonna copy this whole thing over to player 2. Let's go do that. Now I've made a big mess here, but I'm just going to grab this from the top, being careful not to pull it apart. And let's go in here and change a few things around. Every reference to player 1, we're going to change to player 2. Player 2 inventory, target player, explode bomb, player 2 inventory, player 2 inventory. We're just changing a whole bunch of player 1s to player 2s here. Nothing really else to do here. Player 2, player 2. If this isn't working, figure out which part of it isn't working. You're gonna have to play test for every single power up. And if one of them isn't working, go into this part of the code here and make sure you've changed all of them over to player 2. Let's give it one last look. Oh, here's one I missed, player 2. You see, even I can do that. Okay, so that part's good. I just want to see if there's anything else here I've forgotten about. So the code in the power-ups is already automatically set up to work perfectly with everything. This collision detection code, yeah, this part has to be copied over. So I'm going to take this whole big wide block of code, the widest block ever, and I'll copy that over to player 2 now. And let's move it down to a spot where it's not so crowded, and let's have a look at it. Of course, we want to initialize player 2 score instead of player 1. And we're going to change P2 score if we score a point here. And if we're touching something, we want to go back to a new start position. It's not minus 200, but positive 200. We also don't technically need this kill both players here, because that's going to affect both of us. I'm just going to pull this out here because we don't need it. If one player touches the other, it's going to be the same as the other touching one. It's basically the same thing happening twice, so we really don't need that code, just in the interest of efficiency. I think we're done now. I'm not 100% sure, so I'm going to pause my broadcast right now and play through this game thoroughly and make sure that everything's working properly. And I'll probably come back at the end with a little couple of bug fixes that'll get us back going again, and then we'll be good to go. Okay guys, I've gone over the game and I found a couple of bugs, nothing too serious, mostly just errors in translating stuff from player 1 to player 2. The one other bug that I found, I'll show you right now. So under player 1, we've got a green flag click event here, and this is where we do the destruction. We just did this a few minutes ago. I changed my score by 1 when I crossed the line here, but I actually didn't put it inside the if statement. That's going to make your score just keep going up forever. So I'm going to move that inside the if statement and drag everything else back. I've got to do the same thing for player 2 because I made the same mistake twice. We're going to change the score right here after we move ourselves back. Okay, so now we're changing our score in the right place. We also need a winning condition here. So while we're in this block of code, let me just do one more thing. I've already coded it for you, so have a look at what I've done here. If player 2 score is greater than 3 or player 1 score is greater than 3, then broadcast game over. Now, so that's just going to give you a game over screen. I've just taken the liberty of creating one over here on the right hand side. It's pretty boring, but it will basically hide at the beginning and then show later on. Now, you probably want something that says player 1 wins, player 2 wins, and have different screens for those events. And so each one of them would have a different if statement. Then if player 2 score is greater than 3, then do that. You also want to end the game after you broadcast your game over. So let's just go stop all after that. Meanwhile, over in player 2, you're going to see a couple of things. Number one, we're making ourselves score a point here if we're over at our starting position. We have to flip it around. I originally had X position is greater than 162. It actually should be X position less than minus 162. So the opposite side of the screen, the invisible line we're drawing, is going to be on the opposite side of the screen for player 2. Otherwise, player 2 is just going to be frozen in place, having already won the battle and being sent back to its winning condition, so that's no good. You're also going to have to... Oh yeah, there's a couple of other things here in player 2. So the directions are a little bit weird here. Let me show you the game. You'll notice that the clock is on the left-hand side for player 1 and on the right-hand side for player 2. I flipped them to make it look symmetrical, but the problem with doing it that way is we have to change some of these numbers here. So I'm back inside the player 2 code, the define trigger power section here. Originally this said so the clock should be at 90, not minus 90, and the eraser has to be at minus 90 rather than 90, otherwise you're not going to be able to trigger those properly. Now, I went through the code and found a whole bunch of other spots in this block of code where I just forgot to change. There's just so many places where we have to change P2 and P2 inventory over to from P1 to P2. So we're changing it here and here and here and here and here and here. You can see there's, well, let me see how many changes. There should be 3, 6, 9, 12. So there's 12 different places you have to change that. I think I changed it in 8 or 9 of them. And so my game was buggy. And once I went back and fixed all those, all my power-ups were working again. So that should be working fine now. I think that my game is more or less running now. I haven't thoroughly play tested it yet, mostly because I don't have a second player who's been willing to spend time with me playing around with this. I'd be really interested in seeing how you guys do and whether you have any success with this or not, and whether it's a fun game or not. It's a game that I designed, but I haven't really had much time to play it yet. I just wanted to kind of see what developed. So please remix this game if you like, or just go ahead and play it and let me know what you think. I'm very eager to hear next week. So go ahead and do that. In the meantime, thanks a lot for watching. Hopefully there won't be any more bugs here. If there are, I'll post a little update, but I'm thinking we're pretty good now. I've played through the game and it's all working great. So good luck to you all. It's a complicated piece of code here. I don't think we're going to be getting any more complicated than this when it comes to coding games for guys your age. So hopefully you stuck through it till the bitter end. Thanks for doing this, and we'll catch you next time.